Calling this emergency meeting of the legislature to order. Ask Mike to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Roll call. Deputy Presiding Officer Howard Coppell.
Here.
Alternate Deputy Presiding Officer Denise Ford.
She's having some difficulty technologically with the logging on, but she'll be on in a moment.
Thank you. Legislator Sela Bino.
Here.
Legislator Carrier Salage.
Here.
Legislator Deborah Muley.
Here.
Legislator C. William Gaylord III.
Present.
Thank you. Legislator Vincent Muscarella. Legislator Muscarella. Legislator Ellen Birnbaum.
Here.
Legislator Delia DeRiggi-Whitten. Legislator James Kennedy.
Here.
Legislator Thomas McKevitt.
Here.
Legislator Laura Schaefer.
Here.
Thank you. Legislator John Ferretti. Legislator Ferretti. Legislator Arnold Drucker.
Here.
Legislator Rosemary Walker. Rosemary Walker. Legislator Joshua Lafazan.
Here, sorry, I was muted.
Okay, thank you, Rose. Legislator Joshua Lafazan. Legislator Stephen Rhodes.
Present.
Minority Leader Kavan Abrahams.
Here.
Thank you. Presiding Officer Richard Nicolello.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir.
All right. Could you just try Legislator Muscarella again?
Certainly. Legislator Vincent
And
Muscarella.
I hope you got me, Mr. Pulitzer.
I did, ma'am.
Thank you.
Legislator Vincent Muscarella.
Hi, this is Josh. I'm here.
Okay, Josh, we got you. Shall I continue, Presiding Officer? We're okay.
Yeah, you have a quorum?
Yes, sir.
All right. The first item is item 412. We need an emergency on that? Mike, could you call the emergency on that?
Yes, sir. An emergency resolution declaring an emergency for immediate action upon a resolution authorizing the county assessor to grant exemptions for eligible property owners under Section 467 and 459 of the real property tax law for the 2021-2022 assessment roll and dispensing of the requirement to file a renewal application for the 2021-2022 assessment roll pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order number 202.83.
Thank you, Mike. Before we ask for a motion to establish the emergency, I'm going to ask Legislator DeRiggi-Whitten to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Legislator DeRiggi-Whitten makes a motion to establish the emergency, seconded by Legislator McKevitt. And with respect to the emergency, we'll get into the substance of this in a moment, but it is designed to avoid having seniors lining up at our town halls, county facilities to apply for their exemptions in the next week or so before the deadline hits. So the emergency nature of it is clear. as to why we would need to opt in on an emergency basis. Any debated discussion on the emergency? Hearing none, all in favor of the emergency signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, now, as to item 412, 2020 is a resolution authorizing the county assessor to grant exemptions for eligible real property owners under section 456 and 459C of the real property tax law for the 2021, 2022 assessment roll, and dispensing with the requirement to file a renewal application for the 2021, 2022 assessment roll pursuant to the governor's executive order number 202.83. A motion by Legislator McCavitt, seconded by Legislator DeRigi Whitten. So the items before us, just in the last several days, I believe on Saturday, the governor issued an executive order which allows local governments to automatically renew 2021 benefits for all property owners who received the exemption in 2020, unless the locality has a reason to believe an individual has changed their primary address, added another owner to the deed, or transferred the property to a new owner or passed away. So this gives an automatic renewal of the exemption to those who were eligible in 2020, avoids having, again, people having to file that application to renew the exemption for 2021. Any debate or discussion? Anyone want to comment on this? Legislator DeRigi Whitten.
I just want to thank you for holding this meeting. I know we all probably have other things to do right now, but this is important to do it now so that it's timely, so our seniors especially know that to make a trip out at this time is not necessary. So I appreciate everyone's effort with this.
Thank you. Just for the record, Legislator Muscarella is on the call, correct? Unless he's muting himself. All right, there's an indication that he is actually on. All right, and I also want to echo what Legislator DeRigi Whitten said. I want to thank all the legislators who have made time into the schedule at this time of year to participate today. We had asked all the legislators to, except for a couple of us, to do this remotely. We were right before the holidays. We just didn't want to get everyone together in the same location for public health reasons. So, any other debate or discussion on this exemption? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. All right. Second item is 413. Could you call the emergency for that as well?
We don't have an emergency for that, presiding officer. Sorry for the delay. A resolution to authorize a transfer of appropriation made within the budget for the year 2020, 413-20 of the OMB.
Okay, a motion to establish the emergency made by Minority Leader Abraham, seconded by Deputy Presiding Officer Coppell. So we need first to all right, before we vote on the emergency, will you please explain the nature of the emergency to us?
Good afternoon, legislators. Thank you for taking this item before you. This item is to spend the balance of the CARES funding that we received in back in May. We had to reshuffle the deck a little bit from what we think, was spendable because of just the way the buckets lined up compared to what we were getting additional reimbursement from FEMA on. This plan has been submitted to the feds. It's been approved, accepted by them. They don't approve it. But this is consistent with it. It's just the way the budget was laid out. We didn't need as much money in OTPS spending because we're getting FEMA reimbursements, so we have additional costs in personnel expenses. I'd say 99.9% of it, or 99% of it, is related to public safety and public health, and that's why we had to redo what we originally submitted as far as the original supplemental appropriation.
So we've had 2 meetings in the month of December. Why is this coming to us now?
The reality of the situation is that as we're getting down close to the end of the year and figuring out where we had to spend the money to, it just fell into the timing that I couldn't do it at the December 14th meeting or prior to that because we didn't have a real finalized number of where the buckets were going to filled up with. So, and it's just, I tried not to do this because I'm not trying to do any polling for salaries or anything else. That's why we moved a lot of money around prior to this. But the nature of what we're doing and trying to spend this before December 31st created the problem. So,
obviously the pandemic has been here since March. The CARES Act money has been here for months now. So, we've known the amount that we had, that the county would be reimbursed. But so again, I mean, why at the 11th hour are we figuring out where the money is going to be spent?
We're sticking consistently with the plan. It's the last few millions of dollars that we're trying to expend. That because of the way that, unfortunately, the way the budget process or the charter is written, I need to come to you to move around appropriations. And to your point, yes, we probably should have come a little sooner, but this pandemic has strained a lot of personnel resources to figure out things, and we're working with multiple agencies to get this stuff done, such as working with the police department, the county attorney's office, the compliance office, the controller's office, to see what's allowable and not allowable. There's been constant meetings, I would say bi-weekly, and when we got down to the end, we realized that we needed to reshuffle a deck. So I don't have a more solid excuse as to why I didn't come in December. We didn't really have finalized numbers at that point. So
how much of this 19 million has to be reshuffled because it's not allowable, or it's simply a matter of changing priorities?
It's because we're maximizing our reimbursement because we're getting FEMA funds for some of the OTPS spending that we originally thought was going to come in there. And we thought we were going to have to purchase more equipment, general expenses, and contractual services that we see now is going to be submitted for FEMA reimbursement.
Do other legislators want to question on the nature of the emergency? Legislator Ridgeway.
Hi, how much extra are you getting from FEMA?
It's approximately, I want to say, $10 million that we will be seeking additional funding for. On top of that, though, part of what we're doing, though, too, is that there's a match on the FEMA side that can be covered under the CARES funding piece of this. That kind of we didn't know in the beginning, and as we got down to the latter part of this is what happened. So,
I want to say, we keep thanking everyone, but I really thank you because I know we're walking into uncharted, territory, and to be able to secure additional FEMA funding, which might free up some of the CARES Act funding, I think is a win for the county. So I appreciate your efforts, and I know just even meeting the regular budget and our payroll and everything else has been stressful, but we do appreciate your efforts. They don't go unnoticed, okay?
Thank you, legislator. I appreciate that. To my staff, too, have been
Absolutely.
Diligently working through this process. So,
Andy, what happens if this does not get approved today?
Well, the deadline is December 31st. I mean, there's moving targets out there, but, this thing has been moving and evolving for a long period of time. At one point, there was hope that it would be a revenue replacement where we wouldn't have had to create this fund. But now with the looming legislation, I don't we have to get the money spent before December 31st. I have the expenses to cover it. I want to close it out, be done with it, so we can submit all the filings to the Fed and move on to next year with a clean slate. So, because I don't want to have to sit here and guess and choose what I'm going to be paying from CARES funding going forward. So, and I don't know if the legislation will be extended to 2021. So, I've been hearing a lot of different things, legislators. We've been hearing this for months, that Washington is coming and this is what we got. So, I don't want to take the chance that something is going to, prevent us from spending this money by December 31st. The plan is in place. It's ready to go. It's just a matter of how we get it into the budget system in order to do that. So,
Could you make that a little clearer? I mean, so what is it that you're saying? Obviously, this is a transfer. It's not a new allocation of monies. It's a transfer. So if we don't approve the transfer, what happens?
well, then where we have money, where we have the plan to spend the money, will not be able to be charged to the CARES funding, because it's not that the plan has changed per se. It's the way the buckets that we submitted to the Fed, how we have the budget system in place. The money's been appropriated. The $103 million has been received. We now just have to prove the expenditures, which is a mechanism which we have to do to journal entry money from one spot to another spot. And in order for me to do that, I can't do that unless I have the approval of the legislature to move the money from point A to point B, just because of the way the budget constraints are in the charter, and that's just the way it is. And it's like everything else. If I want to move $1, I need your approval to do that. So
moving for purposes of confirming with the federal government that the CARES Act money has been spent, moving it from point A to point B is considered the actual expenditure of the money?
yes, I would say yes, because we have to get it out of the bucket that it's in order to move it over to there.
But what if it stays in that bucket? What happens?
Well, then let's just say if I don't move $20 million, then we're short $20 million on the operating budget as a result of this. So we'd have to absorb that amongst many other expenses and revenue shortfalls that we have. So it's a very big risk to take from my perspective, because we have the plan in place of how we're going to spend the money. It's just because we need the budgeted appropriation to do it. That's why. So.
Okay, I'm still not following you. If the money has already been, it's already been designated for a certain purpose, you're just changing the purpose.
Yeah.
So what is it that, if we've designated already for a purpose, doesn't that satisfy the federal government's requirements that the CARES Act money be spent by the end of the year?
But the way we have done this, though, we've moved almost approximately $80 million in funding already to against the cash that's been received from the feds. We want to continue that path, and we need the additional $20-some-odd million in order for that to occur. I don't want to take the chance to say that we left it in this bucket and they disallow it because they said you absorbed it into the operating budget. I want to just be consistent so that we can go into next year with all the money moved and appropriated in the right buckets. And I am of the opinion that it has to be moved from point A to point B in order to show that it was actually truly a CARES-related expense, because that's the way we've set up the funding source to do that. So.
Well, I mean, where it is now is a CARES-related expense, is it not? I mean, obviously, it's been
not in the eyes. I would think if I were looking at it, it's if I have for argument's sake, it's you have the police department who have the 90-some-odd million of expenses over here that we moved some of it already. We're now prohibited because the budgeted appropriation is not enough to cover that. So I mean, and when am I going to be able to move that, and when is it going to occur? We know what the plan is to do it. I just think it's one of those things that it's a mechanism of how the county budget process works as opposed to what's happening here. So, look, this is going to free up funding on this side for what we have as revenue shortfalls that we're going to move over from bucket A to bucket B. So, it's $20 million of federal funds. So.
okay. Again, any other legislators have any questions with respect to the emergency?
I did, presiding officer.
All right. Yeah, you're coming in very weak, so could you just give your name again?
Sorry, Rich. Yeah, the question that I had is, I'm still not following and I know that the presiding officer has asked these questions, but I'm still not following the answer. If money has already been allocated, and if the allocation of the money is what satisfies CARES Act, that it's being spent on a CARES Act expense, why is the transfer necessary?
Maybe I'm not doing a good job explaining this, legislator. Maybe that's the issue. I have appropriations that I need to relieve in part of our plan that we've developed as far as like gap closing plans to close out the operating funds. If I don't move this money, I will have a shortfall in the operating funds, because it's one of those things that we have to move the appropriation. All we're doing is rejuggling the deck. Is all we're doing here. We're not doing anything other than that. But I need to take the money from the police department's budget and move it into the CARES Act funding, because I am under the the rule of that I have major operating funds that I have to operate with in order to accomplish what we budget on. And part of the plan, our gap closing plan that we've been consistent with, is use of CARES funding to do this. Now, because it's sitting over here, if I close the books and records out, I don't move that money from point A to point B, I don't know how the federal government will treat that. I do not know that. There's not been a lot of guidance. There's been a lot of moving guidance on this. And I don't want to take the risk that because we can't effectuate a change from moving an appropriation within the designated buckets that we have out there is very risky to me, that we're not going to be able to move this appropriation by year end.
But the question that I have, Mr. Persich, is that when we initially appropriated these funds in the buckets, to use your terminology, that the administration requested, for example, $2.5 million in emergency response for CARES Act equipment, $6.5 million in emergency response for general expenses, and $10.9 million in COVID-related contractual expenses. When we allocated those funds, those were for purposes that satisfied CARES Act, were they not? Otherwise, why would they have been requested?
That was the original plan. Yes, it was. Then we realized, with the help of the consultant, that some of these other expenses would be covered under FEMA. So we're maximizing the CARES funding by transferring these expenditures can now be covered by another federal agency, and that's what we're doing. We have additional expenses in public safety that far exceed what the CARES funding is, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to just put things into the right buckets before the end of the year, because the guidance I see is that it ends December 31st.
Just for the record, Legislator Ferretti is on the is in attendance at the meeting at this moment.
So we're maximizing reimbursement, for lack of a better thing. That's what we're trying to do here, in addition to reshuffling the deck.
Am I correct then in my understanding that this is for money that's already been spent?
All the money that, no, the money has been spent, yes. It's been spent in the police budget. It's been spent in the general fund budget. It's already been spent. But now we need to take the appropriation to free up the money in those funds to put it over into the COVID fund.
So all we're being asked to do at this point really has nothing to do specifically with whether the federal government will approve this as a CARES Act expense, but really has to do with plugging holes in your operating budget.
The plan has always been to use the CARES funding to plug the hole in the operating budget, because we've had expenditures that have exceeded what we've anticipated. In addition, we've had revenue shortfalls that have created unprecedented times in this budget. I mean,
but you didn't know that you were going to have these revenue shortfalls 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 2 months ago?
We've been working diligently to figure out how to make the appropriations and what they were going to be. But as we dug a little deeper into this, which has just occurred, we moved $80 million because, that money, there's a mechanism that everybody forgets about is that, I can't use that cash to cover the general fund and vice versa. So there is a cash piece of this that's associated with it. It frees up cash to pay general fund or police district fund, which includes payroll, fringe benefits. I can't use that CARES funding for that purpose. It's not, you can't commingle these cash funds. So this is freeing up, because we're in a tight cash position at the end of this year specifically. This is going to assist us in freeing up cash to make debt service payments, payroll payments, and everything else on top of that. So
I guess my frustration, though, Mr. Persich, is that this again is a situation where the administration is saying that there's an emergency, but it is an emergency of your own making. Right? An emergency is there's a sudden circumstance that requires immediate action on behalf of the legislature. Right? What we have here seems to be a problem that we knew was going to happen at some point in time, but we're bringing it up at the last minute, and the result of that is that it does not get the benefit of the scrutiny and the public disclosure that the normal course, the normal process you would have to go through to get this approved would go. And it's just, you know, it seems to be the latest example. And in this case, we're not talking about a couple of $1,000s. I mean, we're talking about $20 million in funding that we're being asked to shortcut the process again because it sounds like the administration didn't plan properly. And I guess my frustration is, at what point in time does this stop?
Legislator, I don't know how to address that other than the fact that, you know, we were figuring out how things were going to be done. I'm not a big fan of coming to you here as an emergency. I do understand that. As the year end progresses, you know, there's a lot of things going on in the world, and this is one of the things that, you know, maybe slipped through the cracks in OMB. I'll give it that much. But, you know, I think that it's part of how I want to maximize reimbursement so that I can sit here comfortably and say that this is the way I think the budget needs to look. And I guess the other component that I forgot about, which was the cash component, which is, you know, I had $100 million sitting out there that we have to flip around. And as December comes along, our cash balances burn down very quickly because the streams are not coming in. And because we had this CARES funding sitting on the sidelines, we've been actively trying to transfer funds from the operating budget into the CARES fund. And to your point, it probably shouldn't have happened, but I can't tell you as to the specific reasons as to why. There was some things going on that we weren't sure of how the appropriations were going to line up. And then as we got closer to the end of the year, as time permitted, we sat down and we realized that we had to reshuffle the deck in the CARES fund. So I don't have a viable, good excuse as to why, other than the fact that it's here now and I have to move the money. So,
just for the record, Legislator Ford has also joined us.
So it simply sounds as though we just weren't prepared.
I don't think I'll take it on the chin for my department. I don't think we're amply prepared to move the money, but we've been watching it closely. And I will say this, to a counterpoint to that is that there's been a lot of people working on this and interpreting this legislation, and there's a lot of work to move even a dollar that we have to move through the process here, through the controller's office, through the departments, getting memos signed and everything else. And, you know, what's allowed and disallowed when you go into, you know, you get a lot of opinions on how things are meant to be spent. So, you know, some of these things became, you know, apparent that we couldn't charge to this after dealing with the controller's office and everything else. So it's been a long journey. I cannot deny that. It's not the best process, but, you know, this is an unprecedented year. I can say that for sure. You know, this is the worst I've seen a budget, and I have money I want to spend, and I guess this is the best way I can figure out how to spend it. So.
And just out of curiosity, and this will be my last question, when did we know that we were going to get the FEMA funding?
There's been ongoing, that's a moving target, I would say, but we've been working with our consultants to find out some more, you know, FEMA reimbursement is forthcoming. There was some conversations in Washington about the new CARES Act that might be additional funding for FEMA, but we realized that some of these expenses are reimbursable under the FEMA guidelines. Similar to when we did Sandy. I think it came out, you know, maybe I'll give it probably maybe November, October, somewhere in that time frame.
So sometime last month.
Yes.
And I have no other questions. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Legislator Gaylor.
All right, thank you. I hope you can hear me, and I'm coming in clear. All right, Mr. Persich, I have just a couple questions I'd like to ask, if you don't mind. Can you tell me specifically if there will be any county employees who would not be paid if this money is not transferred this year?
The answer to that would be no, but, you know, it has to do
Okay,
with...
so
I mean,
so
they will be paid. They have enough appropriations in the operating budget for them to be paid. So the answer to that is yes. The other part of this coin is that there's cash associated with this CARES funding that doesn't really impact the budget, but it impacts the cash of the county. So.
Okay, so but this money was for a specific purpose under the CARES Act,
Correct.
and we thought to put it in certain buckets when this money came to us. It would seem to me that the administration would want to either expand testing sites, provide some additional contract money to Northwell, to NUMIC, all directly related to the maybe the testing of the new strand of COVID that the governor announced. He wants us to start testing. If this is not going to pay the salaries of employees, and even though you're trying to repurpose it into salaries, then I think the money should be spent for what it was designated for: COVID equipment, COVID testing. And I'm not sure why it's not being done that way. Can you provide some insight?
Well, yes, I can, because we were the frontline people who were responding to the pandemic. You know, majority, almost 99% of it is in the public safety, public health arena. Other parts of it is to keep these buildings clean for the employees to come in here. So while I hear your points about how we repurpose it, I wish, you know, the pot of money was bigger that it could do stuff with, but it's not. But that said, this is going to cover costs that were directly related to the pandemic. It's for the front line. It's for the ambulance people, the police department who responded to these calls, the fire marshals who are doing the enforcement of this, you know, social distancing. I could go on and on and on. And, you know, it's become, you know, one other thing, too, which is one of the things that we forget is that we had to change our technology here a little bit on how we do business. And that part of this funding is being used for that. So, you know, we've all dedicated a substantial amount of time to this pandemic. And, you know, those are the people who are going, what we're repurposing is the money for them to be, you know, theoretically that's what it's being used for, to pay those people for what they did. And it relieves, because I have a hole in my budget for 2020 that's pretty substantial. And this is going to be used to offset that. So, I mean, I wish I had more money to give out to people. I definitely do. I mean, some of the volunteer fire, but if we had more funding, maybe we could do that. But we don't exactly have, you know, a lot of cash on hand that I would say that gives us the ability to do that, you know. I mean, this has been an unprecedented year on this budget. I mean, the strains are, it's things like I've never seen, legislator. And I'll just leave it there, because I look at every purchase. I scrutinize every purchase. You can ask some of the departments what I do. You know, it's a process that, you know, has, you know, it's evolved into something that, you know, we're managing dollars for dollars, you know, and it's not an easy task is what I can say.
Okay, but I haven't, and maybe you have provided, but I haven't seen any data to indicate exactly where you want to put this, or what funds this $20 million is going to free up. I mean, I did hear you say something about police budget and then the general purpose budget. Are you freeing up, I mean, sanitation dollars, DPW dollars? Are you freeing up Parks Department dollars? Are you freeing, you know, basically what you're trying to do, it appears to me, this is an accounting emergency created by your own doing, and now you want to try to move money out of the CARES, money that was specifically designed to address COVID-19 issues, take it out of the CARES Act area and repurpose it into the general fund for purposes not related necessarily to COVID, because I haven't seen anything to indicate what you're going to do with the $20 million, other than try to free up salary dollars. So have you provided that data?
I haven't provided the data. I know where the money is going to be going, where we're taking it to and from. I mean, it's on a budgetary basis. It's coming mostly. We're freeing up appropriations, for lack of a better thing, in the police budget, fire commission, both police district and headquarter funds will be freed up. to offset the shortfall we have in revenue. But it's mostly going to be used just to cover the salary expenses in public safety and public health, and, you know, some of the areas in DPW for cleaning and some of the stuff they had to build, like all the stuff that's here, and some of the additional fringe benefits costs that go along with that are allowable under this CARES funding. So.
Okay, so, and I'm not sure if you answered the question. I know the presiding officer asked a couple different ways, but are we going to lose $20 million if we don't pass this legislation today? Is the federal government taking $20 million from Nassau County on December 31st?
I don't believe that's the case, but I think it could be clawed back if we don't expend the money by December 31st. I don't think they're going to come in and swoop out.
But it's already, but according to the federal government, it's already been spent. It's already been allocated and spent. You just want to repurpose the buckets, as you call it now, internally.
Correct.
So, okay, so we're in no jeopardy of losing $20 million. The only benefit here, since the administration is not spending it on COVID-19 related areas now, is to free up operating budget dollars. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that's consistent with the plan that we've been presented to everybody, including NYFR and this body, about what we were going to use this funding.
What plan are you talking about?
Our gap closing plan.
We have a copy of this plan?
It's a gap closing plan that we've had since the
Did you provide a copy with this legislation?
I didn't provide a copy. No, I did not.
Have you provided a copy to the legislature at any point in time?
I believe in one of my budget presentations we've done that.
So you don't know if you did, and now you want me to vote in favor of a plan you haven't even provided us with any information on. Because it's your plan. It's not my plan.
Understood, legislature.
And you don't know whose salaries we're going to pay when we transfer this money specifically. You refer to it as filling buckets throughout the I guess the administration. We've got buckets out there now that need to be filled or reallocated money into buckets and taken out of other buckets. Is a buckets an accounting term?
No, legislator. It's just, I would call it a description of how we do the budget.
I don't mean to sound like I'm frustrated, but I'm very frustrated.
Can I stop you there for 1 second, though? When I say buckets, behind those numbers that we put out there is a name of a person who worked or has done a specific task as a result of this pandemic. It's not that I'm estimating or saying. We have to, this is, part of the issue is that, we have to go through lines and lines of payroll information to get this information in an acceptable format to what has to happen. So I'll use Joe Smith works in the police department. He's an ambulance driver. He responded during a certain period of time, which were COVID calls. We're taking his expenses and moving it from the police department budget that is an allowable expense under the CARES funding over to there. So that and when I say buckets, it's probably the wrong term. It's the appropriations in which we have the money set aside for it to pay.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I understand. But that ambulance service bureau employee already been paid. He was paid doing his job. Just because it was COVID now, you're trying to go ahead and apply these federal dollars that were given to you for COVID-related purposes to free up operational dollars and create, additional funding to be reallocated on the other side of the budget line. I would rather see this money spent directly on COVID-19 related issues, additional testing, additional sites. I mean, if you look at the city meds throughout the county, my God, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours standing in line. Why can't the county use this money and create additional testing sites to alleviate some of the burden that some of these clinics are having? And I guess this is a plea to the other legislators. I just don't understand, other than from a strictly budgeting, self-created emergency at the 11th hour, that we're trying to reallocate funds to free up additional dollars going into next year for purposes not related to COVID-19, although you can make some, some kind of a argument to the effect that it is indirectly related, whereby the county's saying this is for salaries, and no employee is going to be shortchanged on a salary. They've already been paid all their salaries to date. So again, I just don't see the need to be doing this today. I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Let me just follow up a little bit. Now, you indicated in terms of where the money's going, salaries and fringe benefits, primarily workers' comp-related expenses. You mentioned a couple of things, ambulances, police, fire marshal. Then you mentioned technology. Any other departments of the county getting any not departments, any other employees, salaries from other departments getting
There's
paid?
certain departments in Health and Human Services, in shared services, which would be a bucket of people, like from IT to purchasing, economic development for minority affairs, and other things, the outreach that we did. And the other large ticket item I will say is public safety eats up a lot of this money, and I mean that like it's $99 million I can get to. The other small piece that we're using is because we'll lose money on the FEMA side. So what we're doing is we're putting money on the FEMA money that we'd have to spend. The CARES funding will do that. So there'll be a transfer between the CARES funding to the FEMA fund to cover the shortfall in what we consider this county share. So all of this is, I'll put it in the top three categories for you, Presiding Officer. It's public safety, health and human services, shared services, which includes the IT world, and then the FEMA. Those are the lion's share of what this money is being spent on. So,
with respect to the shared services and technology, I mean, obviously, there's a distinction between someone who's working with technology and a police officer who's going out to answer a call, or a fire marshal who's out making sure that the restrictions are followed in restaurants and catering facilities. So I guess the argument the administration would make with technology is that even though they're not directly working with respect to CARES response, they are providing a supplemental service which the county provides, and indirectly is in support of the COVID response. Is that accurate?
That's a fair enough assessment. There's indirect costs associated with that as a result of this pandemic that has been incurred as a result of it, from technology to certain other things that we've had to do in the buildings. Rearrange desks, put plexiglass up, things like that we've had to do that are not a direct related expense. It's a direct related in the sense that it's employee safety that we're working to strive and keep, you know what I mean? Because that's one of the functions that we have to do. But it's not, some of the IT stuff is, look, when we were at 25%, people had to work from home. We had to do a lot of things, and I would think in the data center, and I'm not the IT expert, but I think we would have had to go find ways to make the bandwidth bigger, how we had to get, different software providers to keep the I would say the county data center safe. I would defer that to the IT department, but I think that's part of the expenses that were related to this. So, and that could be a public safety issue too. So.
Okay. So you've given me the larger areas, but any other departments? For example, did anything go into the health, the Parks Department, for example?
Part of the Parks Department was to clean some of the things that they had to do over there for the recreation piece of it. Okay. Same thing with Public Works. I mean, there's been some, incurred costs. There's building cleaners that come around here. That's an eligible covered expense. Right. Again, I'll use, even this chamber as an example of what some of these expenditures have, amassed, So.
Do you have a list of the county departments that received, that we're using CARES Act money to substitute for operating expenses?
I can get that for you, sure, legislator. I mean, we do have some, thing that shows it, but the big buckets are going to be in public safety. But
yeah, I understand.
We can provide that.
I just want to see the universe of where the monies went, and if there are other departments, a justification, so to speak, as to why that would be something that we would spend the CARES Act money on.
We can get that for you, absolutely.
Legislator Ferretti?
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Hi, Mr. Persick.
Good afternoon, legislator.
Hi. So I'm going to limit my questions to just the questions I have on the basis of this being an emergency. But in the event that the emergency is granted, I will have additional questions. But I do have some just
You can
basic
go ahead with
preliminary
all of them
questions
now.
because I want to.
We're in the midst of
I'm
this
sorry?
anyway, so I mean, I mean, we were trying to distinguish emergency and non-emergency, but legislators, whatever questions you have, let's do it now.
Oh,
Okay.
all right.
Okay. I may need to come back anyway because I've got some things written down that in any event. Mr. Persick, I think I heard you just say, and it's hard to hear over the Zoom sometimes, but that there was about $99 million of CARES money that was dedicated to public safety. Is that correct?
Public safety, public health, and what's the other one? Shared services is what I would say. So
All right. And how much of that went to the police department?
I think almost a majority. I think it's 92 million approximately is going to them.
Did you say about 92?
It's a little under 90 million. I'm sorry.
So can you tell me what constitutes a COVID-related police expense?
Well, according to the federal guidance that was given to us, anything that was substantially dedicated in the midst of the pandemic. That's the way it's been justified to us. And, you know, we get payrolls. We have the department certify those payrolls of, you know, these people worked on COVID-related expenses. Then that's how we figured out what the amount of money is for each bucket that we needed to put it into.
So let me make sure I understand. That $90 million, or $90+ million, that was dedicated to the COVID-related police expenses, was that used exclusively for services related to COVID by the police department?
Yes, that would be the ambulances,
So-
all the things associated, the calls, everything that's associated with what happened during those, the middle
What
of
I'm
the
saying
peak.
is, was there ever police on overtime that were getting paid out of this money that were answering non-COVID related calls?
No.
And do you have any tracking of that or any safeguards that ensure that every dollar that was spent out of that 90 million was spent on COVID-related public safety matters?
We work with the police department to figure out what areas within the confines of the police budget, it's not just the police department, but those budgets, of where those expenses will be charged, allowable charges to this fund that was substantially dedicated to that. Then we went back and we got the payroll records for the individuals who we think are allowed, because of what was going on, of who worked during those time periods, and it was straight time cost. The overtime money went directly charged to the police budget. It was not, we didn't incur any additional overtime charges that could be charged against CARES funding.
So none of the 90 million went to overtime for the police?
No.
Okay.
It's all straight time costs is what I'm being told, so.
Okay, so I don't know if you answered my question, though. Is there any documenting or any coordination with the police department to ensure that, you know, if X amount of time is spent by the police department on COVID-related matters, they will receive X amount of funding to ensure that the funding is directly related to COVID-related services?
Yes, the process we have in place, legislator, which maybe I should have started off in the beginning, is that what happens is we get payroll information, and we go back to the departments, and they have to submit a memo to us, signing like an affidavit attesting to the fact that they've used this. This is the correct amount of expenses that are related to COVID, and then there's backup associated with that they attest to, saying that this is how we see the money was spent for CARES-related expenses. We then take that information and we submit it we review it, we go through a compliance check, and then we send it over, and we have a third-party consultant looking at it. We send that money then over to the controller's office, and they do a background accounting function that occurs. And so,
Okay.
To answer your question, yes, there's documentation associated with every dollar that's being spent, and it's justified by the individual departments or their department heads, for lack of a better thing.
And after that accounting was done, did you come up $7.2 million short in terms of salary?
When we got down to the end, yes. That's what
Okay.
we're seeing. In addition to the fact that we realized we could maximize additional expenses we had as a result of FEMA reimbursement. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. We had additional expenses that we could charge to CARES, plus we received additional FEMA funds.
So the $90 million that went towards the police department, was that all towards salary?
Salary fringes is what it is. You know, the components of fringes.
So what constitutes police-related COVID expenses? What are they doing? I know that they were transferring people back and forth to the hospital, but what else were the police doing that was COVID-related?
They would. I can't speak for specifically operationally what they were doing. What I know, being on those calls in the afternoon when the height of the pandemic was going on, you know, the ambulance calls, the 911 calls were through the roof. You know, that were non-related to day-to-day public safety. The number of ambulance calls that were out there we had to respond to those, and you know, you had ambulances going. I would imagine it could have been only a little bit of a, you know, pandemonium when it was happening, because you're getting a call in and you're at one place to get to another place. So I think the you know, the public safety officers or the police and the paramedics were running around, you know, strictly dedicated to it, because number one, we were basically shut down as an economy and as a world, for lack of a better thing. So there was nobody on the roads. You know, and there was not a lot of other, I would say, things occurring in the world. But this is kind of how we've justified how these expenses were incurred, and they weren't COVID-related. It's not like, you know, when we get a 911 call and it's a cardiac call, this is not it. This was related to, you know, somebody called up and the public panicked, and every time there was a call, it was, you know, I'm not feeling good. I couldn't breathe.
Mr. Persick, I understand that. All I'm saying is it's $90 million. There were not 90 million people that were transported to the hospital in Nassau County since the pandemic. And even if there were, that's $1 million of transport. So I'm just trying to understand what the $90 million was spent on by the police, what they were doing that justified $90 million of this COVID money going towards them. As you have indicated that every penny of it has been spent on COVID-related services, I'm just asking what those services were.
Well, it's 90. Part of that 90 million is not only it's the fringes associated with that officer or paramedic or 911 operator, and in addition to their payroll costs. So.
All right.
You know,
so you're telling me that COVID, the police and the public safety, I'm sorry, just the police-related services has cost $90 million because of COVID,
yeah,
right? That's your testimony?
I mean, yes, I would. And included in that 90 is probably fire marshals, medical examiner, and a couple other things. But you know, just to be clear, I mean, of the 90.
Well, you said it was 99 million, and 90 million was for the police. So is the fire marshal included in the 99 million?
It's, let me rephrase that, legislator. It's 91 million that's related in public safety costs. Okay.
And how much of that is the police?
Hang on 1 second. It's approximately 80 million in police department expenses.
Okay, and now they're asking, and now you're saying they need another 7.2. So that'll be a total of 98.2 million that's being dedicated to public safety for COVID-related services, right?
No, I'm including this transfer in that number. So.
Okay, understood. Okay. Now we're transferring from 3 lines here, right? COVID CARES Act equipment, 2.5 million, right? That's one of them?
Yes.
Okay, what was the original amount in that fund?
Hang on 1 second, it's in the backup. $3 million.
Okay, so we spent 500,000 out of that fund?
Correct.
What do we spend it on?
Miscellaneous equipment. I can get you a list of things. I don't know off the top of my head, but you know, could have been some IT equipment, some other things that are related.
I'm sorry, some what equipment? I'm sorry.
IT, you know, computers and stuff like that. So. Telenetworking.
Okay, how about the general expense line, which we're taking 6.5? What was originally in there?
That I would say is mostly like cleaning products and other things that were related, or miscellaneous costs for, you know, some additional stuff that we needed during the pandemic, whether it be.
No, I'm saying what was the original amount?
The original amount, I'm sorry, $7 million.
So we took 500,000 out of there.
Well, we took 6.5 million out of there.
No, I'm sorry, we spent 500,000 out of there.
That's correct, yes. And I was, and what those.
And that would be used for general equipment such as cleaning products. Is that correct?
Could be a multitude of things, legislator. It could be certain IT switches we might have needed, other things that might have come up, you know what I mean? Certain miscellaneous.
How about PPE? How about PPE?
No, I don't think PPE was not paid out of here. This was paid out of, that was paid out of expense through FEMA and OEM. So the PPE was not paid out of here.
Well, what's your understanding as to what could be paid out of the general expense fund? Could PPE be paid out of the general expense line in this?
Could it be? Yes. Should it be?
Yeah,
No, because
it could.
it was paid. Most of the PPE equipment was done. We centralized all PPE for control through the Office of Emergency Management because there was FEMA reimbursement as a result of that. So that's why we did it that way. We centralized it. That's why everything was done funneled through that, so the dollars could be spent on PPE through OEM. And
How
that
about
was
setting up
distributed to other
additional?
agencies.
How about setting up additional test sites? Could that be paid for out of the general expense line?
Legislator, I don't know if I can answer that because I'm not the public health guy here. I don't know how we could do that. This is what I do know about this. The state is in charge of this. The State Department of Health is the one who can tell us how we test, where we test, and who we can test with. So I don't know if throwing money at it, although it may sound a good thing, I don't know if we have the authority to do that. I do not know that. I would defer to the health department.
That's a problem, Mr. Persick. Somebody's got to know. You're asking us to transfer these funds. I'd like to know what we could do with them before transferring them. There's people that are, as you know, hurting right now, severely. There are people that are trying to get tested that cannot. There are people being turned away from municipal testing sites because they're overcrowded. There are people that don't have sufficient PPE, and I think we have a right to know if we can use this funding to alleviate these concerns for those people. Moving on to the contractual expense, $10.9 million taken out of there. What was that number originally?
It was originally $12.9 million.
Okay, and so we've spent $2 million.
We spent $2 million. That's correct.
And what was that contract?
I think it was mostly the disinfecting of the buildings. We used a third-party contractor to do that. And they did, they, with the assistance of DPW doing with their staff some of the cleaning, they were the ones who did it, so.
Okay. And in terms of contractual expenses, could the county contract with a vendor to provide additional test sites out of that fund?
I do not know the answer to that. I would say it's possible, but I'm not really sure that would be compliant with how we've set up other testing sites through other mechanisms, like for the FHQs, but I don't remember the funding source how that was done.
I'm sorry, I'm losing you, Mr. Percy.
I think there might have been some health dollars that might have been allocated for this through the Department of Health for those testing sites, but I can confirm that for you. So.
Mr. Persick, what's the total amount of CARES Act money that was for Nassau? Was it 103 or 104?
It's 102,940,679 was the exact dollar amount deposited into the treasurer's account, I think, back in May.
And out of that amount, how much was allocated for salaries and fringe benefits?
The original was $59.5 million and $20.5 million. The modified is 66.7 and 31.2.
So that, if my math is right, that's about $98 million?
Yeah, it's approximately, and yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot $2 million in comp-related expenses. So it's 66, 31, and $2 million, which is roughly around $99 million, approximately.
So roughly $100 million out of the 103 is being used for salaries and fringe benefits.
But for this, yes, we can round to that. It's probably $100 million, correct?
Okay. And just to be clear, if this transfer today is not approved, I believe you indicated that will not affect any person, any county employee getting paid in the next paycheck, right?
There's two components of it. The budget piece of it, no. As I stated earlier, the secondary component is I couldn't commingle cash funds, so it puts the treasurer in a little bit of an unsettling position of his cash position because we have debt service payments that are due on January 1st. So, part of this plan was to do it by December 31st. I will, take it on the chin that it probably should have came earlier, but, you know, in light of the situation, we didn't get here early enough, but it will have an impact on, you know.
And there's no danger of this roughly $20 million being clawed back by the federal government, correct?
I don't know that at this point. No, I cannot say that. I know that for a fact that if we don't spend the money by December 31st, that it will not be clawed back. I do not know that.
Mr. Persick, what's the number what's our fund balance right now?
Our fund balance? As of, I
Yes.
can only give you as of last year, our undesignated, our fund balance is broken up into many components, legislator. As of 12/19, it was $112 million, roughly. That's as of December 31st, 2019.
And when was your last report as to sales tax that you provided us? Is that November?
November, correct.
And what was the outlook as to sales tax in November?
We're still holding to the 20% reduction.
Well, that's your prediction for the year, correct?
That is correct.
But in reality, where are we?
Well, I still have, I haven't gotten the final checks for 2020 in yet, so I can't tell you. You know what I mean?
Where were we in November?
On a year-to-date basis, we're approximately down 12.2%, I think is the number that I looked at. But the numbers have declined again. So, you know, we're cautious about what the incoming first quarter checks will look like. So.
Okay, so just humor me and assume that in the next day that number holds at 12.2%. And you have a number in there calculated at 20%. What's the difference in actual dollars between the sales tax that you had projected and the sales tax that we would actually recognize if it comes in at 12.2% below last year?
Ballpark, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'll give you a range between 90 and 100 million. I don't know the exact dollars, but you know I do have it on a piece of paper somewhere. But you know but let me just qualify that though too. Let's keep in mind that there's other revenue shortfalls within this budget. One, you know, would be on the state aid side of this, that we're seeing a decline in collections that I don't know if we're going to be able to ever recover that amount. We have $220 some odd million budgeted in state aid. I think as of November we received, or October, if I may stand corrected, we only received $65 million. That was a decline from last year of approximately, I think we had 130 some odd million in at the door at that time. So while there's a budget impact that, you know, you're discussing now, there's a cash impact too that occurs. And the cash is what puts the money in the bank accounts or into the people's pocket. And that's a, you know, unsettling position that we find ourselves in this year, which is, you know, almost a liquidity
Mr. Persick, I understand. But you're coming to us asking us to transfer this money, saying you need it, but at the same time telling us that there's no risk of it being clawed back by the federal government. There's no risk of any county employee missing a paycheck. You're also telling us that based on the numbers as we see them now, we're looking at about $100 million in sales tax revenue that's going to come in that you did not project for. We're also sitting on a fund balance of roughly $112 million. And while we have people that can't get tested for COVID, that can't get proper PPE, restaurants that are closing down, businesses closing down everywhere, we have $20 million that we could help these businesses with. And instead, you're coming to us and saying you have an emergency and that this money needs to be dumped into a budget hole that really doesn't even, I don't even know if it exists. It's just another attempt to stockpile cash for next year, this time at the expense of residents that are in need right now. Why can't this money be used for COVID-related expenses for the people? Testing sites, food pantries, you know, money to the fire districts, money to the school districts. You know, why now? Tell me where I'm going wrong. If we have all this extra money in the fund balance, where you under-projected the revenue, why do we need to do this right now?
Legislator, I mean, from where I stand, as much as I want to say that we're in a very financial, comfortable position, I would argue that point, because I don't think we are. I think we're far from it. I think maybe with some actions we might be able to survive this, but that being said, I don't think that the county with a control board and a control period is exactly, I mean, we're not in a position that I could say that I would say that because we had fund balance last year that we're financially stable today in the middle of a pandemic. I wouldn't, and whether you want to debate the sales tax issue or not, I have to be the one on the conservative side to worry about if that is wrong, then at the end of the year, remember, we do debt issuances. We have a ton of outstanding debt which are not related to capital, that we have almost $3 billion in outstanding debt that I have to make almost $300 million in debt service payments on. That they come first. They are first in line. That's the purpose of the debt that we have outstanding. And then I have to pay, everybody who's in chairs that works for this county that are providing all these frontline defenses that the county residents look for. It doesn't come free. So I don't think, you may have a difference of opinion about what you think the financial outlook is, but I have to worry about what the future is going to hold. And the fact that we're in a position in the middle of a pandemic where, if this didn't hit, I wouldn't argue with you that probably if we were having this discussion and I asked to move $20 million last year, that you would have me. But where I sit right now, the revenue side of the equation on every municipality, whether it be in New York to California, is having the same issues. And I will say this, there's a lot of people sweating out there. I am one of them. And I have to err on the side that this is what I think is the best position to put this county in to get back on its fiscal feet. And as much as I would like to give the money out to fire districts who assisted us during this COVID time and everything else, I'm having a problem meeting the obligations of what I have now. So it's...
Mr. Person, the following. Can you tell me how much money the county out of the CARES funds has given to money to villages? How much money?
We haven't given any to villages.
How about fire districts?
None.
How about school districts?
We have not given any to school districts. We don't have we have additional expenses related to CARES that we can't fund. I would love to give it to them if I could, but
How about NUMC?
I'm sorry, Legislator.
How about NUMC?
We haven't given anything to NUMC as a result of this either.
How about Nassau Community College?
No funding has been given to them either.
How about NUMC health clinics?
That one I can't answer on because I know there was money directed to the FHQs that were being used. I would defer that the health department probably could answer that question better than I could.
How about private hospitals?
No.
Okay. I would just note that those are all entities that the town of Hempstead used their CARES Act money to give benefits to. Every single one of the ones I just named. And the county has given zero to those entities. We have an opportunity here to do so. We have an opportunity here to not be hypocrites. And when I say we, I'm pointing at the county executive. Let's do the right thing. Thank you.
Legislator Reggie Whitten.
Hi, Andy.
Hello.
I was able to find your total gap for 2020 that you presented on, I believe it was August 10th. It was $385 million. And you did kind of describe what we were up against at that time.
Thank you.
And, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but from what I understand, this is pretty simple. We're getting additional federal money that we can use if we can show the need for it now. And basically, by doing this transfer, we're showing the need for it. So it's like a no-brainer to me that we have to do this emergency and we have to do this transfer, because if we don't, then we could possibly lose that federal money and not have a way, to either pay for what we want to pay for now or possibly free up a little extra money for the year coming ahead. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. And, I keep going back to the cash position, you know what I mean? And that's not, because if I start explaining this, you're not going to get it, but there's the budget world, which is what I worry about, and then there's the treasurer's world. And, I have CARES money over here, and I don't have enough money over here to pay the bills for the operating expenses, but I have $100 million in cash that I want to take from here to pay these bills over here. In order to effectuate that change, I have to move the money from point A to point B. And going back to where we are, my revenue collections are down, whether it be 12 or 20%. I still have a decline in collections. I have expenses that are rising through the roof that I don't have enough cash to pay those bills. So that's the component of it. I think from a budgeting and a treasurer's world that never really meet up. But we do have, when I say we have constant conversations about it, there's daily phone calls about where we are as far as our cash position and trying to solidify that, because that's what we're trying to do. But to your point, yes, that's what I'm worried about. You know what I mean? We're getting dangerously close to coverage ratios and everything else. You know, we're in the process of going to the market at some point for additional funds, but at this point, you know, it is scary to me to be in a position that I could lose $20 million because I can't afford that. Because what happens then? Suppose I lose 20 here, and then towards the end of the year, I lose another 20 million in sales tax, and I get hit with another bill at 60. I could go on and on of what gets thrown every day at us. You know what I mean? And you know, it's not an easy thing managing a $3 billion budget, and nor am I taking credit that I'm doing, you know, a good job. But there's a lot of moving parts with this that do occur on a day-to-day basis that I don't think, you know, while it sounds like I do have to move this money, there's other components involved in this that make it very risky if we don't do it. And that's where I will leave it there. So
I think it's pretty simple. I mean, if we do this transfer now, you free up a place to actually put the federal money into so that we can basically survive our budget for the next year that's coming up, or at least help us to survive the months ahead. We don't know what's ahead still. This pandemic is not over. So I don't see the downside to doing this so we secure the $20 million. Do we have a lot of extra money if we do this that's exposable or expendable? No. I mean, I would also love to see, you know, getting my whole family tested was not an easy task. You know, I'd love to see us help all these different areas, but even doing this transfer will not free up an extended amount of money. Is that correct?
I agree with you, yes.
So as much as we all care about our first responders, obviously, and our schools, and whether or not we can even do anything with the Board of Health, because that's another whole subject, you know, it's, you know, additional testing with our Board of Health doesn't sound like that's going to be feasible. So the bottom line is, I just think this is the financially prudent thing for us to do, to free up this, to basically secure the $20 million from the federal government by freeing up a spot where we can absolutely use it. Now, if sales tax comes in higher and all this, which, you know, we were all worried about, which is why we did the declaration of need. But if we do come across where we have extra money in April, maybe we can revisit what, you know, we can reimburse some of the fire departments or, you know, whoever needs it. But right now, I think we're still in the survival mode, and I don't see any reason. And I understand why we're being careful, and that's why I'm glad we're having this hearing, because we don't want to have it look as if we're wasting this CARES money. I mean, we're really not. We're securing the federal money. That's the way I see it. And I think being as careful as we can to make sure we get that $20 million is our first obligation as legislators. So I'm completely for this emergency, and I think if we don't do it now and we lose it because we've lost the date, the end of the year, that looks terrible on our position. So again, I'm going to support the emergency, and I hope we can all go ahead and do that. And Andy, thank you again for your time.
Thank you, legislators.
Andy, the number you mentioned for the decrease in sales taxes this year was 12.2%, but all of the reports that we've received to date indicate that the sales taxes for 2020 are down under 8%. What's the discrepancy?
Well, it depends upon what number you're looking at, whether it's the budgeted number or the collections versus last year's actuals. There's two different numbers, I would say. I think 12.2, and I don't have the sheet in front of me, legislator. I have to go back and get it. But the last number I remember as to what our forecasted budget amount is 12.2, because we had an increase in sales tax in the 2020 budget, and then the actual collections year over year are down 8-point-something%. So you're comparing year over year versus what I would say the budgeted forecast. So that's where the 12 comes into play. So
Either way, you're looking at receiving upwards of close to $100 million more than the plan that you provided to us and have stuck with for all of these months. So the county is going to get, any way you look at it really at this point, it was a few days left until Christmas, I mean until the New Year's. Anyway, you look at it, we're going to receive close to $100 million or more than $100 million more than you've been projecting the entire year. I know you said that, well, we may have issues with sales tax, the state aid. Has the administration been communicating with the state government?
There's been some communication between departments. The Department of Probation has been direct communication. the largest culprit is in the early intervention world. I mean, you know what I mean? That's our lion's share of this, that we're not getting the state reimbursement. And legislator, when I say it creates a two-sided problem here. While we can argue over the sales tax piece and the collections might be up, the other thing is that the cash coming in from the state's not being there. So there's a budgeted impact and a cash impact.
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Are you getting any direction from the state? Are they telling you not to expect the sales, the state aid this year? What are they telling you?
We haven't gotten a lot of communication. It's been, I will say, what the standard messaging is that we're temporarily taking 20% less, and in different agencies, it's they're taking more or less. But we've gotten guidance to say that we are withholding 15 to 20% of your money, and that's the guidance we've gotten. The state's budget, from what I read, and I don't dive into it because it's a lot bigger of a consortium of numbers, I would say, but they might have more problems than we do, and unfortunately we're a factor in that pie, or however you want to say that. So.
Well, Legislator Ferretti had mentioned various programs that are in need of these monies, and I know that Legislator DeVigi Witten said, well, maybe we could pay them in April. That these programs and the residents, they need this relief now. So here's my concern, is that the administration is going to hold those sales taxes when it could use the greater than expected amount of sales taxes coming in to fill these operating needs, free up CARES Act money, and provide, pay some of these programs. Administration could do that, not going to do it, and sometime next year there's going to be a press conference with the county executive out in front of the building saying, lo and behold, we have a surplus. We did a great job. Look at how conservatively we managed this COVID pandemic. But what a great job we did. In the meantime, the people who need the money now won't have gotten it. And so from our perspective, that is a very big concern.
Legislator, the county executive, I'm sure, is hearing what's being said here, and it is, of course, the concerns that the economy in Long Island or Nassau County, continues to be where it needs to be. There is concerns about the lag of what may be occurring. What I would say is the lagging indicator in every type of recession, which is the public assistance piece of it, the Medicaid, the purchase services, all these things that we didn't see this year. Budgetarily, I could tell you we haven't seen it, but I think when you look in 6 to 9 months ahead of this thing, that I may be coming and saying I need more money for Medicaid, for emergency vendor payments to keep people at housing, food, all those things that DSS and those other programs provide, and you have to, when we look at the budgets, that's why we do the multi-year plan. I have to look to see, where it's going to be. And, look, the picture's not exactly the rosiest picture. I don't need to tell everybody here, but, that's part of the things that I think, by managing the budget as conservatively as possible, that when these things come up, we can address them so that we can provide those services to the residents. And I don't know, the other thing, too, is when I'm going to get hit with another overtime costs for whatever it is in public safety, or another emergency somewhere else that I don't know. I mean, it seems we've been getting hit with emergencies since 2008, and it seems to be like on a 5-year cycle. It went from a recession to Sandy to, a pandemic to, it's just a cycle of, I think, what's happening. And, municipalities are subject to the same thing as businesses. So the problem is, our pockets are not deep enough to cover some of the shortfalls that we have to do, so to cover the expenses that we have. So,
in a moment, I'm going to turn things over to Legislator Muley has a question, and Legislator Rhodes has additional questions. But I just wanted to sum up by asking you again on the emergency. You told us that employees will get paid, regardless of what we do here today, and I think you've indicated that we will not be losing CARES Act funds if we don't approve this transfer. So I mean, I may be wrong. You can correct me. What is the actual emergency today? So, okay, I mean, I'm giving you an opportunity to say it as direct and
the
concise
answer
way
to
as possible.
the second part of the question, presiding officer, is that I don't know if I'm going to lose this. And part of the plan is while it's been a plan in place when we first did it, we've planned on spending $102.9 million on county expenses to cover shortfalls in revenue. It's been part of the plan since we've gotten the funding. We went through a diligent exercise of how we were going to spend this money. It took a little time to develop like what we thought were eligible expenses and how we're going to get there. Employees will get paid because there's enough budget appropriation. That I will say. I am concerned about the cash position of where the county is by not moving the additional $20 million from this bucket that I can't touch, which is the CARES fund, over to the general expenses or the 5 major operating funds. That is a concern of mine. But I don't know for sure if I don't expend the money. There was very stringent rules that said you had to expend the money, and the way I view it, spending the money is taking it out of the operating funds and putting it into the CARES fund. That's the way I viewed my role as to how the legislation was written by the feds. Okay. So that's why I am here before you. I do take it on the chin for the emergency, not for it being an emergency, but you know, $20 million is $20 million. And could I be wrong? Possible. But I do remember reading the guidance that it had to be spent by 12/31/20. So,
is there an issue here with you're shifting some of the money because of FEMA funds? Is there an issue here if we don't approve at least that part of the transfer, you'll have CARES Act fund and FEMA funds for the same purpose, and therefore you will lose one or the other? Is that an issue or not?
That won't be an issue, no, because
okay.
the FEMA fund doesn't have an expiration on it. Okay. As we learned with Hurricane Sandy, it had a timeline that was far exceeded the 12/31/20. Right. So,
Legislator Muley and Legislator Rhodes.
Thank you, presiding officer. Hi, Andy. How are you?
Good afternoon, legislator. How are you?
Good. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding some things. Nassau County got $103 billion, $103 million. I'm sorry, what was it again? $103 million, right?
I'll give you it's 102.9, just so we're not missing 100,000. It's 102.9 million we received in federal CARES money.
Thank you. And do you know how much money Suffolk County got?
I don't know the exact amount. I think it's 230 some odd million dollars.
Do you know why there's that discrepancy? I mean, Nassau County certainly has more people in it. Do you know why that happened?
Well, it's my understanding from the legislation that was written, it was based on a population size. And Suffolk County didn't have a large township. We'd all know that the town of Hempstead is one of the largest townships in the nation. That's why when the federal funds were divvied up, town of Hempstead received $133 million versus $103 million. Suffolk doesn't have that issue. So.
Oh, I missed that last thing you said. I'm sorry. It faded out.
Suffolk County doesn't have those large townships like the town of Hempstead out there. So.
Right. So, it's my understanding that town of Oyster Bay and town of North Hempstead did not receive that money either. Is that correct?
That is correct. It was the formula was based on a population of over 500,000 people.
Right. So from what I'm understanding, you're saying that Nassau County got far less money than, and we're just going to compare for now to Suffolk County, because the town of Hempstead got a large amount of money. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, is that 103 million, is that enough to cover our pandemic-related expenses in Nassau County?
We have additional expenses that we probably could charge the CARES funding, but this is not everything that we have. This is what we came up to. We came up to $103 million. We probably have more, closer to probably around 110 to 115 million, but we've been focused on 103 or 102.9, I should say, that, you know, once we got to that number, we're satisfied that we met what we can see eligible. We have some things, what I would say is just in case monies, that if, you know, if something gets disallowed, we'll be able to fill in buckets, but that's minimal amount of money. You know what I mean? We have a plan to spend this money, and we're sticking to it, so.
Right. Okay. So, what I was understanding from what you originally presented is that what you're talking about is maximizing the money that comes into the county, and that by doing this, that will accomplish maximizing the monies that we're getting both from the CARES and from emergency management. Is that correct?
Correct. From FEMA, though, not from emergency management.
FEMA, I'm so sorry. Yes, okay. Okay, so as a result, I would have to say that I would agree with Legislator DeRigi-Whitten, and that this just makes sense to me, and I do support the emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legislator Muscarella.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak, but you know, I just want to, and perhaps I don't even have a question. It's just kind of an observation, and it just seems to me that the principle that we're kind of demonstrating here today is that the money is fungible. You know, you're taking this money that the federal government has allocated, and you're using it in a way with accounting tricks to allocate it towards the CARES money. And CARES says it's okay. You're allocating it toward, you're allocating it to free up money elsewhere that's not CARES related. And I understand that it's considered appropriate. And even though we don't have the need for the money, it would appear that CARES allows it. Perhaps I'm being naive. Well, actually, I'm not naive. It's just that, to me, it seems that the county executive and the administration is asking us to do exactly what the county executive and other elected officials, not of my political party, exactly what they're criticizing the town of Hempstead for doing, which is, actually, the town of Hempstead, I think, has done perhaps more to use that money for funding, for directly giving money to other agencies, to villages, to hospitals, to use directly for COVID money. And it just appears to me that it's hypocritical that the town is being criticized for doing exactly what I think we're being asked to do today, which is free up money, take this money, free it up so that we can pay expenses elsewhere. I don't have a problem with voting for this legislation today. I just think that it's hypocritical that elsewhere there are other elected officials are criticizing another jurisdiction for doing the same thing that we and this administration is asking us to do today. Thank you.
Legislator Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. Mr. Persich, it is exactly the same thing, isn't it?
You're referring to Legislator Muscarella's comments? I mean,
yes.
Look, this is not. I can't get into that. I can tell you that this has been consistent.
Oh, I mean, let me break it down for you. You would consider sanitation workers to be essential services, right?
I can't answer that, legislator. I can't.
Okay.
It's not. I don't have guidance.
Would you consider providing water an essential service?
If the need arose, yes, I would consider water is definitely an essential need.
Yeah, in the same way that you're spending $98 million, by my calculation, out of $103 million that you received in CARES Act funding, 95% is being spent on salaries and fringe benefits for essential workers, correct?
That is correct.
Right? And I personally don't have an issue with that. But the question becomes, what's the difference? It's not exactly the same thing, because unlike Nassau County, Money that the town of Hempstead received was spent on direct community benefits, pop-up food pantries, complete meals to vulnerable seniors, soup kitchen funding, funding to every hospital in the township, funding to every college and university within the town of Hempstead for virus protection, monies to villages, monies to fire districts, monies to every school district within the town of Hempstead, money to United Cerebral Palsy, COVID testing for first responders and emergency workers, COVID antibody testing, drive-through COVID testing. In fact, $7 million of funds that actually went to Nassau County, including NUMIC, Nassau Community College, the NUMC Health Clinics, Nassau IDA funding for business PPEs. That money came out of the town of Hempstead's funding. Nassau County didn't contribute anything towards that. We're using it all, virtually, for salaries and for benefits. And so the question that I have, Mr. Persich, is what standard are we supposed to use? And I know that you indicated that the county executive is probably listening today, and perhaps she's the one that should answer that question. Are we supposed to use the standard that the county executive applies for herself in asking for these additional $20 million in funds? Or are we supposed to use the standard that she seeks to apply on every other political entity that does not share her political views? That's the ultimate question. Because when Mr. Muscarella speaks about hypocrisy, that's exactly what we're talking about here, hypocrisy. You are aware of the fact, Mr. Persich, that County Executive Kern joined other legislators not only in criticizing the town of Hempstead for doing the exact same thing that we're doing, but actually calling for a federal investigation of the town of Hempstead for doing exactly what we're doing. You're aware of that, right?
I am aware of that. I read Newsday, legislator. So.
And so how do we reconcile those two things? Do you have any idea?
Well, from my perspective, legislator, what I've done here, and I can't speak for the town of Hempstead, I don't know how they came up with it, but I do know that we've been working diligently with the county attorney's office, its compliance office, and the controller's office on how these monies could be appropriated in this county. I mean, we've done everything that we think that I feel comfortable with saying that this is how it should be spent. As far as another agency or entity that does have done those things, I can't speak for that. I don't know how they came up with their guidance. I don't know what determinations they used for where to spend their money with. I can't speak to that. I can say this, and things that have been brought to my attention. Maybe the town doesn't get the same funding sources as the county does. The town doesn't have money coming from HUD, which we received a ton of money in CBDB money for food banks and all food pantries and everything else that we're dispersing, so we don't need to use this funding. We've also gotten additional money in the health department for pop-up sites and everything else. We've gotten monies from other agencies to cover some of these expenses that I think the constituency needed. So, I mean, I can't comment on what the town of Hempstead did. I cannot comment on the news stories or anything else. I can only comment on the piece of, budget that I need to cover a hole with in order to satisfy that. So, I'm not going to get into policy. I'm not a policy maker. I'm just the budget guy who's trying to get money moved around into buckets, I hate to use that term, to cover shortfalls. But I think there's been additional monies appropriated through other agencies that maybe have satisfied some of the concerns here. And, I can say this, the housing department's been here with a ton of money coming through, which is going to offer rent relief, it's going to offer food, it's going to offer additional services, whatever those be. I'm not the housing specialist. I can only give you the punchlines of certain things. And additionally to the health department for certain coverages of certain things. So, that's the best way I can answer that, legislator. I don't know if that was a long-winded answer around the thing, but that's the best way I can answer it.
So look, I know that it puts you in a difficult position to try and did I lose you guys?
No, we can hear.
Still here. I know, my screen just went blank. I know it puts you in a difficult position, and you say that you're not here to answer on behalf of the county executive, and I certainly understand why. It's a very difficult question to have to answer, but I think that we deserve an answer to that question. And I think that we need, one, not only for an explanation as to how what the county executive is doing is any different from what the town of Hempstead did. Or if there is no difference, that there be an explanation for why she has one standard for herself and one standard for everyone else. And I would like a breakdown of exactly where the $103 million that we received from the federal government actually went. Because I do have the overriding question that with our sales tax revenues being in excess of $100 million, better than we thought they were going to be when you presented your plan to plug the anticipated $380 million hole or so as a result of COVID. Why, if we have $100 million in extra revenue, we need to use any of the CARES Act funding at all for any purposes related to plugging that hole? So there seem to be a lot of unanswered questions that I would love to get answers to before we actually move on this. Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Legislator Ford?
All right. Thank you. Can you hear me? Because I'm on my phone.
Yes, I can hear.
All right. Thank you. Andy, thank you very much for your presentation on this. And I think I share the sentiments of many of the legislators that I sit with, especially within my caucus, in regard to voting for this. But my question then, I guess I wasn't going to ask anything, but you did bring up the fact that aside from the almost $103 million that we received from the federal government, that we also received additional funding through HUD and FEMA, correct?
Correct.
To help with coronavirus. And how much in funding do we get from those agencies?
Legislator, I have to go back and get that, but there was a significant amount of housing money that we can't use. I mean, for the county budget, I want to make sure I can't commingle this, but it has to be dispensed out to the residents or the people in need. I can't use that, so it's direct aid to the people through housing. It's between 20 and 30 million. It might be more than that, I think, is what we've gotten in CDBG.
Yeah.
So.
And then did we receive any money from FEMA in regard to coronavirus, the pandemic?
FEMA is on a reimbursement basis, so we submit project worksheets is what they're called, and then we get reimbursed. Now, there's a whole process that we learned from Hurricane Sandy that, they look at costs differently. So, there is some risk associated with FEMA funds that may be disallowed as opposed to what the CARES guidance has said. So we haven't gotten any money yet from FEMA to answer your question.
But do you know how much we have submitted so far to them for reimbursement?
$18 million in reimbursement.
Okay.
Right.
And then you indicated, though, I guess with the differences when, it was brought up about Suffolk and I guess about the town of Hempstead getting funding as well. In Suffolk, I mean, do they have more residents than we do? I thought they probably had more of a higher population.
I think the last I looked at, the population between the two counties is very similar. Maybe it's off by 100 to 200,000. The legislation, because Suffolk doesn't have a township as large as the town of Hempstead, which is mostly makes up the population of the county.
Right.
That's why, you know what I mean? They have 500,000 people. So the other two townships, kind of divvy up the rest of them, with some villages and stuff like that. So that's the way the federal government wrote the legislation. So.
All right, and that was clearly the 500,000. Was that in? Just a quick question, because I know that when we're looking at all of this, and then I guess now with this, asking the feds to investigate the money that the town had received, and now they're spending it, and which gives me a reason to want to pause on this, just in case if they decide to decide that maybe we all didn't follow the rules the way that we were supposed to. So, but was it clearly indicated to the Nassau County that the reason why we got less money was because they gave the money to the town of Hempstead?
I mean, we received a notification from the Department of Treasury that this was our allocation. I mean,
Okay, but it didn't state that it was reduced because of any certain things. It was just strictly what Nassau County at that time was entitled to, correct?
That's the way I understand that. I can't speak for others, but that's the way how I knew that we were getting $103 million.
And so then our CARES money, we primarily used it for salaries, whether or not it was for the police, emergency, fire, whatever, correct?
Correct.
All right, and it didn't seem like that much in equipment, or we had a certain amount for contractual services, which I guess would have been like to clean out the county buildings, police cars. Was this also used, the CARES Act was also used to purchase?
Yes.
The supplies that were needed?
Some of the funding was used through that, and some of that was done through FEMA. But the disinfectant, the disinfectant of the county properties, I will say, that we've outsourced to a third party, certain buildings are being done that way. In all the departments. Look, we have to clean parks too. We have people in parks. You know what I mean? We have employees that we have to take care of. There's buildings that we have to take care of. I mean, if you look at what the Board of Elections spent on just this election alone, it was astronomical because of just the COVID-related expenses that we had to do. So
all of those expenses were taken out of this $103 million that we received from the CARES Act?
So the majority of the operating expenses that we incurred that we spoke about, yes. You know what I mean? The Board of Elections had its own pot of money. I shouldn't have used them, but I was just giving you an example of what was going on.
Right. Okay. No, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for letting me know. So then I guess, so for us, anything additional other than the equipment and the salaries and the contracts, anything else that we provided any services for our residents came through a different pot of money, and that was a community development block grant money, HUD money, correct?
Correct. And I want to say that some of the testing sites were covered under, I think, the Department of Health or through the CDBG money.
And yeah, that wouldn't be under that. So that's a difference with the town. The town, I think, Legislative Reddy indicated the number of agencies and different companies or whatever that receive funding from the town of Hempstead, and as you had indicated, that they didn't get it. They don't have other pots of money that they can use to be able to offset the 104 million or 14 million that they received. So their 114 million, whatever they received, solely went just for salaries and what other equipment and helping out a lot of these agencies, the hospitals that sorely needed it during this pandemic, correct?
From what I understand, yes, that's what they used their money for.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Denise. Legislator Ferretti.
Rich, did you say me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. My computer froze for a second. Just 2 points and then a few questions for Mr. Persick. I heard Legislator Muley indicated she made some points about the town of Hempstead getting X amount of dollars where Nassau County got something slightly less than that. Last I checked, every resident of the town of Hempstead is a resident of Nassau County. And so any money the town of Hempstead is using, not even taking into account the money that they've spent on the Nassau University Medical Center, the Nassau Community College. Putting that aside, the money that they're investing in the residents of the town of Hempstead is helping Nassau County residents. This idea that the town of Hempstead is somehow separate and apart from Nassau County, the town of Hempstead is within the Nassau County. And as a legislator whose entire district is within the town of Hempstead, thank God the town of Hempstead got that money, because they're the only municipality in Nassau County, based on what this administration wants to do, that actually put the money back into the people. In terms of the money that was spent, there's been a complete lack of transparency from day one with this $103 million. But going more recently, Mr. Persick, I know you're here saying you'll take it on the chin for this one, that it's coming this late. That's all well and good. But if we would have known, I could speak for myself, if I would have known that $20 million was available of this CARES Act money a month, 2 months ago, I would have been insisting that money be put back into businesses, into the residents 2 months ago. You coming here and saying, oh, I'll take this one for the team, that's not good enough. We should have known this 2 months ago, or whenever you knew you were getting that additional funding from FEMA, that this money was available and we could have had an opportunity to work with the administration to get this money back to the residents. For example, I know recently the county executive indicated there's a $6 million program that's going to go to renters for back pay and rent. Well, that's wonderful. According to Newsday, that's going to help 900 residents in the Nassau County. 900 residents. We could be using this money for that, for example. But because of the lack of transparency, because we're finding out about this at the last hour, you're now presenting it as an emergency when really what it is a choice. It's a choice that the county executive and this administration is making to put budget holes and stockpiles of money ahead of residents during a pandemic. That's what we're faced with. And so, that's what I have to say for now. I thank you, Presiding Officer.
Anyone else? Hearing no one, we're going to take a brief recess.
Thank you.
Okay, do me a favor. Listen to me. This is what I need you to do.
Rose, your microphone's on. Just turn your microphone off.
Rose, you're on mic.
Hey, Michelle, what's up? Okay.
Kevin?
Okay, we are back in session. Andy, I'm going to speak for the majority and say that we are tired of self-created emergencies on the part of this administration. The most recent one of which has created a lawsuit. We are tired of getting things at the last minute. We're tired of having to vote on these things, considering on the one hand what we think is the best for the county, but on the other hand, struggling with the fact that we're not being provided information in a timely fashion. And if it were not that this involves CARES Act money and the federal government and issues in relation to the county's response to the COVID pandemic, I think you would see a different result than what you're going to get today. But the message to the administration is this is the end with these emergencies. And if these proposals are not coming to us in a timely fashion and we're not getting full information, then things are going to, then you will not get the votes for emergencies and things will be held up. That we are heading in that direction. And I don't mean to give these remarks to you because I realize that you are being sent down here to a very difficult position. But we have not seen, for example, a Chief Deputy County Executive, who we all know operates this county on a day-to-day basis. She's never come before us. We have not seen, other than serving a subpoena, your higher-ups. And unfortunately, again, you come down here, you seem to be an individual of goodwill, you try to answer the questions, but we've had enough. Again, were it not for the fact that this involves CARES Act monies and COVID response, and were it not with the fact that we're heading to the end of the year in a couple of days, you would get a different result than what you're going to get in a few minutes. But having said that, anyone else want to comment on the emergency? All in favor of the emergency signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Abstentions? Anyone abstaining on the emergency? No. So you have a unanimous vote on the emergency. I will call the item. (413 of 2020), a resolution to authorize the transfer of appropriations made within the budget for the year 2020. Moved by legislator DeRigi Whitten, seconded by legislator Drucker. Now, that's before us. Any further debate or discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. The vote is 17 in favor of the item with 2 abstentions by legislators Rhodes and Ferretti. And that concludes the meeting. So I need a motion to adjourn by legislator Schaefer,
So
seconded by legislator Kennedy. Now that's a Rules Committee meeting. All in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, meeting stands adjourned. Merry Christmas,
Merry
Happy New Year to
Christmas,
everyone.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy
Yes.
holidays.
Yes, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas.
Rules
And
Committee
the very
people,
best
stay where you are.
healthy and Happy New Year.
Here. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas.
All right. Can you take the roll for the Rules Committee, please?
Rules Committee roll call. Legislator Sela Bino. Legislator Sela Bino. Legislator Delia DeRigi Whitten. Ranking Member Kavan Abrahams. Ranking Member Kavan Abrahams. Legislator Laura Schaefer.
Here.
Legislator Stephen Rhodes.
Present.
Vice Chairman Howard Copel.
Here.
Chairman Richard Nicolello.
Here.
We have a quorum, sir, without Sela Bino and Kavan Abrahams at the moment.
All right. So obviously they were on with the full legislative meeting that just concluded. So perhaps maybe just give them a call and make sure that they've not just... we won't have a vote until we get an affirmative vote representation from them, but let's get started on the item. Motion to on table. Need a motion to on table resolution ratifying the Commission of Shared Services award and execution of a contract between, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast, and the execution of a purchase order between the County of Nassau acting on behalf of the County Police Department and Intergraph DBA Hexagon Safety and Infrastructure. Moved by legislator Rhodes, seconded by legislator DeRigi Whitten. First, I want to apologize to the people who were here for this item. I try to pick the ones that will take less time, and obviously I got that pretty wrong this time. So I apologize. I thank you for your patience. I know it's a couple of days before Christmas, and I thank you for waiting for this entire time, Chief. And congratulations, by the way, with your appointment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I also wanted to, before I start this, thank you again for the last time I was here. It was very, very nice of you. Yeah, my name is Chief Ron Walsh, Chief of Support, Nassau County Police Department. And so the item that's before us today is the Hexagon, or Intergraph Corporation Hexagon Safety and Infrastructure CAD system. That's computer-aided dispatch. And that is a sole source item, and it is actually what we're proposing here is the maintenance for this particular product. This contract expired on July 31st of this year, this past year, so we have been without support for that period of time. We actually had received this item from Hexagon on April 27th of 2020, moved it out of the police department by May, and it's been working its way through, and there have been numerous questions that have come up throughout the process about this. So to give a little clarity to that, the computer-aided dispatch software is proprietary to Hexagon. The only people who can work on its database are they themselves. So there's no other option but this company because this is what we use to dispatch our cars. When I say that, when a call comes in from 911, we put it into the CAD system. It electronically, through this software, shows up in front of the dispatchers. They see on their screen the actual words come up of where the call is and where it's supposed to go, and automatically within the system, it recommends the closest cars through what's called the emergency response plans that are internal. Without Hexagon support, we are unable to actually update those emergency response plans, which actually change quite frequently. Every time a volunteer fire department changes its memorandums of agreement between each other for ambulance services, or new ambulance are put on board, or Northwell changes the way we're responding wherever we are, we have to go into the system and change emergency response plans. We don't do that right now because Hexagon's not there to support us, and things are getting backed up where our response plans are not up to date and up to speed, if you will, and it could cause delay in getting the closest available unit to respond to an emergency call for service. That is a very big deal for us. The entire cost of this contract is $828,431.80. That's pretty much, in summary, what's in front of you. I don't know if you have any particular questions that I can answer. I'm ready to answer anything you may have.
You may have covered this, but has there been any consideration to moving to a different vendor?
Yes. I apologize. I meant to put that in my opening statements. Actually, yes. We are evaluating right now other CAD options, and part of the incentive for the radio project that I brought in front last time was that Motorola has actually given us their software called P1 CAD as an incentive in that program. So we actually have a meeting with them the second week or the first week of January to start working towards to make sure that they can do everything that we need their product to do for our CAD environment. So we're looking at that. We believe that that product will be able to serve our needs. It comes at no cost to the county other than the actual configuration and then the installation of the hardware. But it was a $2.8 million incentive that they gave us to help move the radio project along as well. So yes, we are looking at that. I would say that Hexagon is adequate at giving us what we need to make sure that there's no risk for safety when the contracts are in place, but that we are interested in entertaining other vendors at this time.
So note for the record that Minority Leader Abrahams and Legislator Bino have joined us. This is not actually on this contract, but you have such a wealth of knowledge, and you've obviously been the team leader with this. So what happens when you take that new position with Long Beach? And is there someone in progression that
Absolutely. Actually, my number two I've been working with, it's Chief Lorna Atmore. That's why she's at all these meetings. She worked with me actually going through. I don't know that she gets my job, but she's certainly in support. She's very well versed as what's happening there, as well as the people who are in our IT and our communications bureau are very well versed on these things. I make sure that nothing's really a silo. Right. You know, we manage things as one large look at all of the needs for the county as a whole.
All right, I'll turn it over to the other legislators, but I want to thank you. I don't know when your start date is, but I want to thank you for your distinguished, long, dedicated service to this county.
I greatly appreciate it, Mr. Presiding Officer, and I can't thank enough for the opportunity that I've had here in the county. As a side note, and everything I have in my life has been due to the grace of this county, and I feel more than blessed for being here. So thank you very much for those words.
Well, we've been blessed to have you, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Legislator DeReggie Whitten?
I believe we have the Inspector General on the call. I just wanted to have her comment on the procurement and the disclosures. Jody?
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Jody Franzese, Office of the Inspector General. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, great. I just wanted to start off by saying that I know everybody in this meeting agrees that officer and resident safety is of the utmost importance. And certainly we don't question Chief Walsh's and the PD's assertion that maintaining the system for as long as we have it is necessary for that purpose. Our focus in the review was not on the necessity of the service, and we understand now that the PD is exploring other options going forward, which is a reasonable thing to do. But we just wanted to kind of report to you what we found during our review, and certain things came up. We had some issues with the disclosures. we sent our contract review statement. There were several questions that weren't answered fully. It took like 3 tries for the vendor to completely and accurately disclose the required information. I will tell you, I'm here to report that they did disclose, it appears, the required information, and it appears that everything is now complete, which is good. And we had some issues regarding the references. Our concern was that usually references that the vendors list provide positive information. In this instance, however, the vendor's references warned Nassau County to be, that's pretty much right, warned Nassau County of some issues that they had with the vendor. You know, I'm sure that the PD is satisfied with the vendor's service. And again, we don't dispute that there's essential services. But the references listed certain things that were of concern. I mean, they mentioned that, you know, there were problems with the contracts, you know, they weren't getting what they were paying for. There were strange costs that came out of nowhere. They mentioned something about response issues that were poor. But actually what concerned our office most was that the vendor was unresponsive and uncooperative to an audit. And that's where oversight comes in, and that's what concerned us. I am happy to tell you that the chief procurement officer advised us and sent me the language that the Nassau County contract with this vendor has a clause that requires the vendor to cooperate with audit. So that's good news. So that's not as bad as it could be, because our contracts are on the ball. So that's what we have. I wanted to make sure that we reported it just because, you know, we wanted to make sure everybody made an informed decision. I'm sorry, does anybody have any questions?
Do you feel comfortable with us going forward with this contract?
Well, as far as comfort, I will tell you that, you know, it wouldn't be on the form if we didn't think it was something you should consider. However, I think that this is a situation where we have a balancing act in the sense that the necessity is great. Safety is unbelievably important. However, the fact that the PD is exploring other options is a good thing, and perhaps as one of the references of the vendor that we spoke to, they issued an RFP. They kept I'm not suggesting we should. I'm not suggesting that this body should not go forward with the contract. All I'm saying is that an RFP may not be the worst idea going forward. Does that answer your question, Legislator Georgie Whitten?
Pretty much. I just want to have a question for the Chief. Do we own this? Do we own the like computer software for this?
Yeah, we bought licenses to this software. It's changed names a couple of times, but it's probably about 8 years ago. This actual version of it came in 2018 for this particular software product. So we get licenses, and there's a certain number of users that we're allowed to have on it. That's the way these things are managed. And within that, the actual way it's implemented and the way it works is managed by us locally. And when there's things that happen in the actual software itself, you need the vendor online to be able to come in and do that. I do want to say one thing in defense of Hexagon, and while their contract did expire on July 31st, when we had extraordinary need and they are not being paid, they came through and they did what they needed to do to ensure that the public safety was never at risk. When we actually got to the point where things were becoming a problem and there was database work that needed to be done, they did come through and they did ensure that the county did not have those problems, even though they did not get paid. So I just wanted to make sure that was understood.
You know, I think that goes towards their goodwill. I just think that, as the Inspector General mentioned, maybe going forward, since it's really not a sole source situation, maybe we should entertain, you know, other companies a little bit more if we still see any type of lack of cooperation with such things as audits. It's so important that these companies comply with, you know, whenever there's any question like that.
Agreed. That is the plan that we have in the Chief of Support's office right now in our Communications Bureau, is we are exploring the opportunities to bring in other CAD products to meet all the needs of the county. But once you buy one product, they become sole source until you get to the point where you can switch to another product. Changing over for something like that can take anywhere from 6 months to a year to actually get the equipment in, stand it up, configure it properly, and be able to start using it. It's not like switching computer on. It's not like you put a disk in your computer and it pops up. It's a very, very different animal because it affects all of the outlying locations, every in-vehicle computer, all of the workstations over at the Public Safety Center, all of the workstations in our backup Public Safety Dispatch Center downstairs in the bunker. So it's a very large project to transition from, but I do not disagree with the with what was said and that we should be exploring, which is what we have. We've been doing that for a while already, and we want to make sure that it's not only the least expensive option for the county, but one that actually works. So just because Motorola gave us their P1 CAD doesn't mean that's a guarantee that we use it. It has to work for us as well. So it's due diligence on our part, yes.
All right, thank you.
Legislator Coppell, Deputy Presiding Officer Coppell, then Legislator Ford. I'm sorry, Legislator Rhodes.
Okay, you called me, Presiding Officer?
Yeah, I thought your hand was, I see that your hand is up on the screen.
All right, thanks. Forgive me if I'm going over some ground that's already been covered, because I didn't hear everything, especially the Legislator Dirigi Whitten's questions very well. But I understand why you need this contract. The underlying contract is one that I guess you can't get rid of too quickly. You said, I think, was it 6 months to a year?
Yeah, it would be 6 months to a year to get a new vendor stood up here. Once we agreed to another vendor's product, it would take anywhere from 6 months to 1 year to stand up and become operational, a new CAD system. So if we decided today that we were not using Hexagon and we had another product that we could start working on, it would take that amount of time to get it working.
Understood. And are you considering others besides Motorola? Are there others out there?
Yes, we are actually. The Bureau Director and Assistant Bureau Director down in our Communications Bureau are viewing other products and looking at them, knowing what's on the market. And if it doesn't turn out to be the Motorola product, we will put out an RFP for proposals.
Okay. And how has the underlying product been performing for us?
It meets our needs. We have a rather unique environment here in the county because of the size of our organization and of all the different public safety answering locations that we have. They're called PSAPs. So when we bring all that together, we have a very unique situation in the county. It has been able to do what we need to get done. The biggest problem that we've ever had with it was the mapping software, and that was one of the things that I focused on over the last year, and our mapping software is actually working well now. But if you look at the age of IT software products, I would say this one is starting its last third of its life. So it's time for us to be looking, and we are.
Okay. Now, one thing that I noticed and that was distressing is that this company has suffered numerous terminations for convenience by various government agencies on other contracts. As a matter of fact, I think, what was it, 15 in the last 5 years or something like that? In my experience 100 years ago doing government contracting, terminations for convenience typically reflected poor performance, even if it didn't rise to the level of a default. So my question to you is, I know you've got to do this at this point, but do we have a termination for convenience clause in the event that we can get out sooner than the 1 year term of the agreement?
I believe all of our contracts have that written in them. I know even the large Motorola project that I just did does. So we could terminate the contract for our convenience. However, in order to do that, we would have to have something that would be able to do our dispatching. The alternative to this is this card I don't know if you can see it, but it's a 3-by-7-inch paper card that we would actually have to write our calls for service on. When I first came on the job, these used to go into a little conveyor belt and literally be moved.
I get it. I get it. You'd be endangering public safety, and you can't do that. But all I really wanted to find out is that you can indeed terminate for convenience, and that would be reflected. Such a termination for convenience, if we can do it, would be reflected in the amount of money that would be spent. Would that be? Is that correct?
I don't understand the portion about the amount of money to be spent. I do understand.
We've got a price tag of what is it, 800 and some odd thousand?
Yes. So yes, if we terminated for convenience, it would be prorated to the point in time where we actually terminated the contract. Yes.
Good. All right, you've answered my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Legislator Rhodes?
I had no questions, Mr. Presiding Officer.
Okay. All right. Anyone else on the committee? Okay, thank you again, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great holiday.
You too. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Motion to adjourn by Legislator DeRiggi Whitten, seconded by me. All in favor of adjourning, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Passes unanimously, and we are adjourned.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and happy, healthy New Year. Long Beach is going to be very happy.
I hope so. Yeah. I'm going to try to do a good job. No, back someday.
All right. Take care, Chief. Bye-bye. All right, Bill. Happy holidays. Thanks.